That night, during Thanksgiving dinner, my daughter raised her glass and said to the crowd, "My husband taught Dad a lesson. He got what he deserved." The whole table laughed. Only I stayed silent, with a bruise under my eye and a black envelope in my hand. A minute later, the room went dead quiet, because I set that envelope on the table and said, "Then let's see who really owns this house." If you've ever been humiliated by your own family in front of others, if you've ever chosen silence because you believed time would speak for you, stay until the end of this story, because sometimes justice doesn't need a shout. It only needs the right signature on the right paper. Leave a single dot in the comments if you've ever stood back up in silence. And if you believe that dignity is the one thing that can't be sold, hit subscribe, because I'll tell you real stories where silence becomes a verdict and truth always finds its way home. I opened the door. The smell of roast turkey and cinnamon drifted through the hallway like memories pretending to be kind. The table was set for 10. Cream linens, polished silver, 2 low candles, and a few sprigs of rosemary in glass jars. My old friends from the Ford dealership in Austin, Tom, Miguel, and Ray, had arrived early. They sat on the left side of the table, polite smiles hiding the glances toward the fading yellow-purple bruise beneath my left eye. I told them to sit tight and went to the kitchen, checking the stuffing, the cranberry sauce, and subtly turning the cracked plate so the break faced the wall. 30 years of selling cars had taught me how to hide the cracks customers didn't need to see, but some cracks can't be hidden. Linda came out wearing a dark blue dress, a perfume I didn't recognize. She adjusted the chandelier so the light fell directly on the center of the table. "Your friends here yet?" she asked, voice smooth as glass. I nodded and called everyone to the table. Wade followed behind her. Crisp white shirt, smile too practiced. He brushed past me toward the head of the table, my seat, and placed his hand on the back of the chair like claiming a flag. I said nothing. I just took the seat to the right, fingers grazing the edge of the napkin. Cold. Dinner began with safe talk, football, gas prices, and new pickup models. Forks touched china with small, nervous clicks. The candles flickered in the thin draft from the back door. I poured water, reminding myself to breathe evenly. Then came the toast. Linda stood. She looked around, her smile soft, rehearsed. "Thank you all for coming. This year has brought many changes, and—" She tapped her glass. The chime was too precise. Then she said it, clearly, word by word. "My husband taught Dad a lesson. He got what he deserved." For 1 second, sound itself seemed to tighten into a single thread. I heard Miguel's spoon stop midair and fall without a clang. A line of red wine rolled over the rim of Wade's glass, dripping onto the white cloth, blooming into a small circle like an unwanted signature. The chandelier, the one Linda had adjusted, cast a sharp light across my face, making the bruise impossible to ignore. Ray swallowed hard. Tom turned his head slightly as if to give me a private corner of air. I didn't cover it. People hide what they're ashamed of. This bruise wasn't shameful. Wade smirked, elbow resting easily on the chair back that wasn't his. I set down my glass. Steady. Exact. The way I'd place a contract before a buyer. No shake. No waste. "Let's eat first," I said, voice even. "Then we'll talk." No one moved. No one wanted to be the first to chew on silence. I reached into my vest pocket, pulled out the black envelope. Heavy paper, fine-grained, corners crisp. I laid it in the center of the table, right over the red wine stain, like a lid closing over something rotten. "We'll eat," I said, eyes on Linda. "And after that, then let's see who really owns this house." A faint whisper moved around the table like a draft, left to right. Wade leaned back, smirking. "What's this, old man, a show?" Linda set her glass down, pressing its stem to steady her hands. I didn't open the envelope. I left it there in plain sight, like a ticking clock. The smell of turkey, cinnamon, and butter suddenly felt heavy. I cut a slice of meat, chewed slowly, letting the salt and sweetness anchor me in this uneven room. And, as every good story does, Memory pulled me back exactly 2 weeks earlier. That afternoon, the Texas sun angled through the kitchen window, the light cutting the room in half like a gentle blade. I had folded the napkins the way my late wife used to, triangles pointing toward the plate, like arrows aiming at decency. I made pot roast with honey carrots, Linda's favorite as a child. I thought maybe a decent dinner could be a bridge. The insurance check, the remaining payout from the showroom accident. I'd taken it out of its file and slipped it into my pocket. Not a fortune, but enough to let anyone drowning in credit card debt breathe again. Wade came home early. His keys scraped the lock, a small metallic growl into the quiet. "Long day?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. He tossed his jacket over a chair, headed straight for the fridge, and cracked open a beer. Linda came down the hall, arms crossed. Her eyes scanned the table, pausing at the special occasion china. Then she looked at me, puzzled. I pulled the check from my pocket, hands trembling a little. Not from reluctance, but from hope. Hope that this might fix what I hadn't managed to fix when I was still just a father, trying to reach his little girl. "I know you two are struggling," I said. "The insurance company just released the remaining payout. I want to help cover that overdue card." Wade took 3 long strides. Toward me, his hand snapped around the check like a trap closing, the paper stretching tight between strong fingers. He looked at the amount, the corner of his mouth curving. Not into a smile, but something colder. "Good," Wade said, eyes not meeting mine but looking straight through me. "Give me your debit card and PIN, too. The rest will go toward this month's fees." "This," I said evenly, "is for the credit card. You two need a plan. I decide what's enough in this house." His voice was flat, metallic. "You're here because we allow it. Linda felt sorry for you after the little accident." "This is my house," I replied, not loudly but clearly. "My name's on the deed." Wade's hand shot out, a shove straight to the chest. I stumbled half a step back, my foot catching a chair leg. My body tilted before I could react. The edge of the chair struck my ribs. My head clipped the armrest. Then the table corner. A clean, dull thud echoed in my skull, light bursting into white specks. I fell backward. My tie, the dark blue one Linda had given me years ago, caught a slow, warm drop of blood spreading like molasses. "No," said Linda, but her voice wasn't hers. Sharp, deliberate. She stood in the doorway, eyes shifting between Wade and me. I pushed myself up on one elbow and touched my forehead. My palm came away red. The cut was shallow, but neat. The neat ones always hurt the longest. "You brought this on yourself," Linda said. "Don't make things harder. Give him what he needs." Wade folded the check, slid it into his pocket, and walked out, sipping his beer like a man completing a duty. They left the kitchen. From the living room came canned laughter from the TV, bright, hollow, and cruel. I sat on the tile floor, back against the cabinet, pulling a breath deep enough to remind my lungs how. The cold of the ceramic crept through my shirt like a whisper. Some houses collapse without storms. That night, I cleaned the wound myself and taped it shut. The mirror reflected a 67-year-old man who'd once sold cars on faith, now relearning how to believe in himself. I opened a drawer and took out an empty black envelope, the kind I used years ago for important contracts. I set it on the desk and looked at it for a long time. It looked like a small gavel, silent but weighty. I blinked. The kitchen from 2 weeks earlier faded like the end of a reel. Before me now, Thanksgiving candles flickered, and Linda sat across from me, my daughter, in the present. In the golden light, the same black envelope lay in the middle of the table, covering the red wine stain. Dinner continued, or pretended to. I chatted with Tom about the new F-150, listened to Ray talk about his wife's gout finally healing, and laughed when Miguel teased me about my old slogan, "Honesty drives every deal." Wade occasionally lifted his glass, watching me like a man who thought he'd already won. Linda dabbed the edge of her plate, straightened the salt and pepper shakers, small acts of control. I let everything pass like wind over grass. A good salesman knows how to wait until the customer wonders, where's the real contract? When dessert plates were served, I set down my fork. Thank you all for coming, I said, warm enough not to alarm, firm enough to draw eyes. I touched the black envelope, just a tap, like a gavel. Earlier, my daughter said her husband taught me a lesson. I paused, letting the words fall and stand still in the air. I agree. It was a useful one. Wade snorted. Linda raised an eyebrow. A lesson, I continued. That dignity isn't something you negotiate over dinner, and that a house, a home, is where people learn when to stay silent and when to speak. I slid the envelope toward Linda, unopened. Put it in your purse, I said. Open it after dinner, here, in front of everyone. I looked around. Tom set down his fork, Miguel straightened up, and Ray placed his hand on the table, palm open. Let's see, I said slowly. Who really owns this house? No one spoke, but I could hear it, silence taking shape, gaining edges and weight. It didn't shatter like a plate or cut like a knife. It sounded like a gavel touching wood, round, final, and certain to echo long after the dinner ended. The next morning after that dinner, the house was so quiet I could hear the clock hands. Move. Linda didn't say a word to me. She washed the dishes, cleared the table, put on soft music, everything as if following a script where my role no longer existed. Wade watched the news in the living room, the volume turned up just enough to drown out my presence. They both acted as if this house only held two people. I walked by. Neither turned their head. The coffee in the pot cooled, and the foam on top was dark brown like rust. I poured myself a cup, set it down on the table, listening to the dry sound of ceramic hitting wood, sharp, hollow, and neither of them reacted. I was still sitting there when Wade left, the door closing harder than necessary. Linda followed, locking the door out of habit, then remembered I was still inside. She paused, looked at me for half a second, and said quietly, I'm going to work. I nodded, but she wasn't waiting for that nod. When their car disappeared down the street, I left the dining table and went straight to the garage. It was cold and real there. The raw concrete, the smell of oil and rusted metal. It made breathing easier than that polite silence outside. On the wall hung plaques from my Ford dealership years. Top Seller 2012, Customer Satisfaction Award, and Ford Certified Trainer 2015. Dust had settled evenly, but the words were still legible. I sat on the folding chair, resting my arms on my knees. A thin beam of light came through the small window, cutting across the metal plaques, glinting faintly like old honor. I found my old cassette player, the one that used to play the radio ad we recorded back then for a sales campaign. Honesty drives every deal. The phrase was mine, but another man's voice read it. A deep, steady announcer's voice echoed through the garage and faded. I rewound, played it again, then again. Honesty drives every deal. Each time those words played, I felt anchored to whatever part of me was still whole. Out there, they could treat me like a useless old man, a fading fool. But in this garage, I remembered every contract, every customer, every handshake that I knew had never been a lie. I sold cars for 30 years on one belief. People only come back when they trust you. And now, under my own roof, my daughter let a man who treats honor like pocket change walk over me without blinking. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out an old brown leather notebook, the kind I used to record monthly sales. It would serve a new purpose now. I wrote the first line, my handwriting shaky but clear. November 28th, 2024, Thanksgiving dinner. Wade said the old man got taught a lesson. Linda stayed silent. No one reacted. Everyone heard. I turned to the next page, November 26th, 7:30 a.m. No one said good morning. I made coffee. They didn't reply. Wade took my car keys, said he'd borrow it. Didn't ask first. Note, Ford Focus, license 73R02. I paused, looking at the words. The steady blue ink across white paper calmed me. If they wanted to make me look senile, I'd prove, line by line, that my memory was still sharp, just as when I calculated commissions for 30 cars a month. I'd record everything: expenses, behavior, words. I opened another small notebook. This one was for numbers. I checked my bank account, noted each transaction: electricity, water, insurance, groceries, everything I paid. I totaled it. In 2 months, over $4,000 spent on them. The number wasn't angry. It was just cold and solid like metal. I closed the book and leaned back in the chair. Noon sunlight streamed through the crack of the door, lighting up the top seller 2012 plaque. I stared at it for a while, then let out a quiet laugh. Back then, they took a photo of me holding the trophy. Blue Ford logo behind me. It hung at the dealership for years. When customers asked, "How do you sell so many cars?" I said, "I just tell the truth, and the truth sells itself." Maybe now I'd have to use the truth again, but not to sell cars. This time, to save my life. I picked up the pen and wrote one last line that day. If silence is the only weapon left, I'll sharpen it well. Then I closed the notebook, set it on the workbench beside the still cassette. Outside, I heard the rumble of Wade's car as they came home. Doors opened, footsteps thudded. Linda's laughter echoed faintly down the hall. I didn't move. I stayed there, quiet. As dusk fell, I reached up and turned off the garage light, leaving only a sliver of daylight through the small window, illuminating the chalk words I had written on the wall. Honesty drives every deal. The letters glowed faintly in the dark, as if the room itself understood that from this day forward, honesty wouldn't be for selling cars anymore. It would be for starting a silent war. On Thursday afternoon, light Texas rain began to fall. Rain here rarely lasts long, but when it hit the old tin roof of the garage, the patter sounded like the heartbeat of someone trying to keep calm. I sat on a folding chair, a leather notebook open before me with dozens of new entries. I had numbered each small detail from the past 2 weeks. 13, 14, 15, each number a sign that this house was being taken over, bit by bit, if not by paperwork, then by attitude. Wade locked the car in the yard. The door slammed, his laugh echoing inside. I checked the wall clock, 3:27. At that hour he should have been at the brokerage office, if he still had work. But for months now I hadn't seen him in dress shirts. Instead, it was black tees and a phone glued to his hand. I stood, switched off the garage lights, and moved quietly inside. The living room door was open. No one was there. I heard a voice coming from the study, the small room at the end of the hall where I used to keep sales records, now Wade's private office. His voice was low, but every word was clear. I stopped in the kitchen doorway, my heart ticking, and listened. "Yeah, we'll file guardianship in February. He's slipping already. Memory, balance, finances, all of it fits." I froze. The word guardianship hit my ear like an iron door slamming shut. In this business, I'd seen plenty of contract scams, but never such a sophisticated one, legalizing betrayal. Wade's voice continued. "Dr. Mason Turner will sign off on the report. He owes me a favor. Once the petition's filed, we get access to everything: the account, the house, the insurance remainder. The old man won't even know what hit him." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, then pulled my phone from my pocket. I turned on the recorder, aiming the mic toward the door. Texas law allows one-party recording as long as you're a participant or present at the scene. I'd memorized clauses like that back when selling cars required knowing the law, so customers couldn't turn the tables on you. Wade laughed into the phone, the sound cold as sliding glass. "Yeah, he's just sitting in the garage these days. Barely talks. We'll make him look unfit easily." Recording wasn't new, a habit from my sales days. When a conversation smelled like deceit, I always hit record to have proof. I hid the phone as usual, hit rec. A tiny beep, the timer started. 00:02:38. I hit stop, named the file according to my rule, Conversation. Office 1212 MP3, and saved it in the evidence. Folder. The act was simple, but it stamped the truth. The rain stopped. The sky lightened as if the weather, too, were trying to side with someone. I sat at the table, my mind racing as if I were calculating a discount during rush hour. Guardianship, petition, Dr. Mason Turner, February. I repeated the keywords and jotted them into the notebook. Then I rose and walked quietly back to the room at the end of the hall to be sure they weren't home. The door was ajar. I pushed it gently. It made no sound. Inside, cheap perfume mixed with cigarette smoke. Papers littered the desk. A yellow folder lay in the corner with bold letters. Draft petition for guardianship. Henry Drummond. I put on my glasses. My heart still raced, but my eyes read each line. The form wasn't filled out, but it was enough to understand. They planned to file in Travis County, claiming diminished capacity, requiring legal guardianship. Under the assets section, they listed the house value, $520,000. Clipped to the folder was an appraisal signed by someone named Carlton Myers from Hill County Appraisal Service. They'd even handled that part. There was also a list of bank accounts and approximate balances. Details only someone in the house would know. I turned to the last page, a handwritten note in black ink, Wade's handwriting. Target date, Feb 14th, file and freeze assets. I pulled out my phone, used the camera, and photographed every page and every line. No flash, just window light. Each shot I checked carefully. The text was sharp, 11 pictures total. I saved them into a new folder named Evidence 1, then closed the folder and replaced it exactly where I'd found it, angled the same. A car salesman learns to notice every tiny mark on a dashboard, a scratch, a dust smudge, a paper half a centimeter out of place, and now that skill saved me. Before leaving the room, I looked around. A poster on the wall read, "Dream big, work harder." I almost laughed. I'd taught Linda to hang similar posters at the showroom to motivate staff. Now that same slogan hung in the room being used to plan my legal execution. I returned to the garage, sat back down on the folding chair and stared out at the yard. The rain had stopped, and the afternoon light had a warm cast. Wade's voice kept echoing in my head, steady and slow. "We'll file guardianship in February. He's slipping." I closed my eyes. In 30-plus years in this trade, I'd met every kind of customer. Clever, deceitful, desperate. I could read them the moment they walked in, could tell when someone lied by the way their eyes shifted. I'd always been proud of that instinct, of smelling deceit before it spoke. And now that instinct delivered the bitterest truth. The person trying to con me was not some stranger customer, but my own daughter and the man she chose. I opened the notebook and wrote one line. I sold cars for 30 years, and I always smelled deceit before it found its voice. I set the pen down, looked up through the small window where the last strip of daylight slipped across the old plaques. A breeze stirred, making the top seller 2012 plaque wobble. It tapped the wall, a small metallic sound like a reminder. Don't let someone else write the last chapter of your story. I stood, opened the tool cabinet, and took out an old spare phone I hadn't used in ages. I powered it on, checked the SIM for signal, opened the browser, and typed, "Elder Law Attorney, Austin, Texas." When the list loaded, I paused at a name. Abigail Kent, Elder Law and Property Rights. I jotted the number into the notebook, closed the pen cap, and sat quietly in the dim light. I had decided. If they wanted to use the law to steal everything, I would use the law to get it all back. The next morning, the air was cool, mist floating above the road like a thin mirror. I drove the old Ford Focus out of the neighborhood, as quiet as a man leaving a battlefield no one knew had been fought. Inside my jacket, the phone rested still, holding a 2-minute 38-second recording, my first piece of evidence. I didn't yet know what to do next, only that staying in that house any longer would make me the second piece. The road into downtown Austin was nearly empty, with a few cyclists and a few shops opening early. Passing through South Congress, I stopped at a small cafe called Morning Brew. Condensation fogged the glass, and inside, the warm yellow light looked like an accidental pocket of peace. I pushed the door open. The bell above chimed softly. The smell of espresso and buttered waffles filled the air, the kind of scent that reminds a person life still has room to breathe. The owner, a woman around my age with hair streaked silver and brown, was wiping the counter. Seeing me, she smiled. "Morning, sir. Not too busy yet. What'll it be?" "Not sure," I said, my voice rough from sleepless nights. "Maybe something strong, but not whiskey." She chuckled, poured black coffee, and slid the cup toward me. "Strongest thing we've got." I nodded, inhaled the steam, the warmth spreading through my chest like temporary salvation. She introduced herself, Rosa Turner. The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. She asked gently, "You live around here?" "San Marcos," I said, but today it was enough just to get out of the house. Rosa set the cloth down, watching me with the look of someone who's heard more stories than she wanted. "Hard to stay home?" I stayed quiet for a moment. Some questions are small, but heavier than a confession. Finally, I said, "My daughter and her husband. They're trying to have me declared incompetent." I heard them. "They're filing for guardianship to control the assets." Rosa didn't look surprised, only sighed. "I know that feeling." I looked at her. "You do?" "Yes," she nodded. 2 years ago, my son did the same. Said I wasn't capable of managing my savings. I believed him, until the bank notice arrived saying the account was now in his name. I set the cup down, my heart thudding. "How'd you get out?" She smiled, not proud, just relieved. "I found someone who knows the law, Abigail Kent. She's an attorney who protects older folks, helped me overturn the guardianship, reclaim control, and even made my son apologize in court. I still keep her on file, just in case." She bent, opened a drawer, and handed me a business card. Thick white paper, rounded corners, clean and sharp print. Abigail Kent, Elder Law and Property Rights, Austin, TX. The phone number and Congress Avenue address were printed below. I held the card, feeling the fine grain under my fingertips. The name looked like a door opening. Small, but bright. Rosa's voice softened. "You seem like a man who knows how to stay calm. That's the most important thing if you want to win." I smiled faintly. "I used to sell cars. The best salesman isn't the one who talks most, but the one who waits for the customer reveal what they need." "And now?" she asked. I looked through the window. Raindrops on the glass reflected my face. Older, tired, but the eyes had light again. "Now," I said, "I'm not selling cars anymore. I'm selling the truth." Rosa didn't answer. She lifted her cup, tapped it lightly against mine. The clink of glass was soft and short, but it sounded like a promise. We sat quietly for a while. She told me more about Abigail Kent, young but principled, known in Austin for taking on law firms that exploit loopholes to rob the elderly. I listened carefully, writing everything in my notebook, name, phone number, and address. Before I left, Rosa said, "I don't know how hard your fight will be, but if it's true, the law still has room for it." I smiled. I spent my life convincing people to believe what they saw. Now I just need one person to believe what I know. When I stepped outside, the wind had calmed. Sunlight after rain glowed on the sidewalk, spreading a honey-gold reflection on the cafe window. I glanced back. Through the glass, Rosa was wiping the counter, smiling, nodding at me. A wordless blessing. I clenched the business card in my hand. Under the sun, the embossed letters, Abigail Kent, shimmered. I slipped it into my jacket pocket beside the phone, holding Conversation, Office 1212, MP3. 2 small things, one piece of paper and one recording, became the first wheels of the justice machine I was about to drive. For the first time in months, I felt I wasn't standing alone. and inside me, a familiar sound quietly came alive. Not an engine, but the hum of faith starting again. Monday morning, the air was cool and thin mist floated over the pavement like a pale mirror. I drove to Abigail Kent's office on the second floor of an old building along Congress Avenue, shaded by rows of oak trees. The brass sign gleamed, Kent and Associates, Elder Law and Property Rights. When the glass door opened, the scent of new paper mixed with coffee. The room was bright, neat, and quiet enough that I could hear the soft tap of a pen on a desk. Abigail stepped out, mid-30s, small frame, sharp, steady eyes. She shook my hand, firm and deliberate, the kind of handshake that told you she didn't talk much. But when she did, people listened. "Mr. Drummond, Rosa Turner told me the basics. Now please tell me everything, no holding back." I told her everything, the overheard conversation, the hidden folder, the house appraisal, the cut on my head, and the recording I had saved. She listened without interrupting, only taking notes. When I finished, Abigail slid a blank sheet toward me, drew 3 connected boxes, and spoke in a calm, low voice. "We're going to take 3 steps, Henry. Think of it like a car's system diagram. You need the starting point, the pipeline, and the exhaust." In the first box, she wrote, "One new will. You'll rewrite your will and move most of your assets into a private trust. Call it the Texas Automotive Integrity Fund. It will support mechanics and their families. Your daughter still receives a symbolic share, so the court doesn't see it as deliberate disinheritance." I nodded, feeling a strange calm. At least my money would fuel what I believed in, not someone's greed. In the second box, she wrote, "2 power of attorney. The person you trust most will be designated to act only if something unexpected happens. I recommend Rosa Turner. She has no financial interest, which makes it legally clean and safe. It activates only if a court confirms you're truly incapacitated." Then she wrote the third box, 330-day notice to vacate, termination of non-lease occupancy. We'll draft it now. Under Texas law, anyone living in your home without a lease can be given 30 days' notice. You don't use it yet, but when the time comes, you just sign and file. Abigail looked up. "These 3 steps are like 3 lock layers on a vintage car. When the outer layer is pried open, the inner one bolts shut." I smiled faintly. "And if they try to drive it off?" "Then we have cameras, affidavits, witnesses, and the law," she said. "Don't shout, don't fight. Let the paperwork speak." She continued carefully. "The will must be notarized and witnessed by 2 people. I'll bring 1 professional and 1 neutral witness to certify you're fully competent when you sign. We'll sign together and record on video if necessary. I'll keep the original in my office and send you a sealed copy. Every sheet is a bolt, and I don't leave a car missing bolts." I studied her handwriting, neat, round, exact, like an electrical diagram for an engine. Everything she said was clear, solid, and nothing was wasted. "Are you ready to sign the first step today?" she asked. "I've sold cars for 30 years, I said. "I know the value of a signature when it protects honor, not profit." She smiled and handed me the pen. My hand pressed down steadily, like the day I signed my first Ford sale. 3 clear strokes, even and strong. The pen on paper sounded like a car door closing tight. Final, no turning back. Abigail folded the document, sealed it in an envelope, and stamped it red. "From today, Henry, your house has a legal firewall. If they touch it again, they touch the law." I stood and thanked her. She handed me a calendar note for 3 days later. That's when we sign with the notary and 2 witnesses. Stepping out into the noonday Austin sun, the sidewalk glowed gold. I stopped, looking at the business card in my hand. Abigail Kent, attorney at law. In the other pocket was the file, conversation, office, Swatch 12, 12 MP3, one side truth, the other law. And for the first time in months, I realized I wasn't just enduring anymore. I was fighting back, with a plan, a blueprint, a destination. Inside me, the engine of faith started again, quiet, deep, but steady. That afternoon was gray, the wind cutting through the oak trees outside, as if trying to sweep away whatever coldness lingered. I sat at the kitchen table, sorting bills and notes, when I heard the lock click. Wade was home early. His footsteps hit the hardwood. Heavy, deliberate, like he wanted the house to feel it. Linda followed, her makeup too dark, her smile stiff as a veneer. There was no polite talk. Before I could greet him, Wade dropped a thick folder on the table. The paper's edge scraped the wood with a hiss. The overhead light struck the pages, each printed line sharp as a blade. "Sign it, Henry," he said, half sneer, half command. "Just some joint tenancy forms. We'll split ownership. Relax, it's just to make things clear." I closed my eyes for a second, listening to the clock tick. Joint tenancy. Two dry legal words, but to them a key to every door. I knew if I signed, the house would shift into their hands. My signature would make me a tenant in my own home. I remembered Abigail's warning, never sign under pressure. I exhaled softly, feigning pain. "Ah, my back," I muttered, hand pressing my chair, voice thin like a man recently hurt. "Doctor says no stress, no strain. I have to be careful." Wade squinted. "That old back again. Always an excuse. It's just a signature. Seconds, that's all." He opened the folder, pointing at the line, "Joint tenancy, conveyance of real property." The bold print hung like a verdict. Linda chuckled, eyes cold. "Just here and here. We took care of everything. Makes sense for everyone." I knew this scene was rehearsed. Tight as a stage play, I had my part ready. While they focused on the papers, my fingers brushed the phone in my pocket. Old habits die hard. When deceit is in the air, I hit record. The tiny tone confirmed video mode. Screen blacked out, mic covered by my hand. Wade's tone shifted lower, more persuasive. "Come on, you're tired. We're just helping, making things neat. We pay the bills, handle the mess. You sign, it's done." He sounded like a salesman closing a deal on an insurance add-on. I smiled faintly, keeping my voice even. "The doctor told me not to sign anything under pressure. I'll need time to review." Weak words on purpose. Bait. Wade's face reddened. His hand slammed the table, rattling the coffee cup. Sugar crystals scattered. "You'll regret this, old man," he hissed, every syllable honed. His eyes cut like glass. Linda stepped beside him, fingers clutching his arm, both of them staring as if manning cannons at a wall. I rose slowly, stretching as if steadying my bad back, and walked toward the small cabinet near the garage. Right beside the security camera I'd installed days earlier, the tiny red light glowed, steady, unblinking. I glanced straight at it, feeling its cold witness. A faint smile touched my lips, half challenge, half light. The phone still recording in my palm, I opened my email app and typed quickly. Subject. Urgent. They tried to force transfer. I attached the fresh recording and photos of the open folder, zooming in on the signature line and the words, "Joint tenancy." Then I wrote, "Abigail, they just tried to make me sign over the property. I faked a back injury to stall. Audio and images attached. Please advise on the next steps. One tap. Send." The moment the email left, it felt like placing the first brick in a wall of defense. Abigail was now in the loop. The law's gears would start turning. She'd respond, maybe involve police, freeze assets if needed. For now, Wade's anger burned hot. He grabbed the folder, voice rising. "You'll regret this," he repeated, off-key with rage. I said nothing. Returning to my seat, I opened my notebook and wrote, 12/2024. Wade pressured signature. Audio plus photos saved. Garage cam recorded. I signed under it. Firm strokes. It felt like sealing a date in history. Not victory yet, but resolve. Linda muttered, "You're making this bigger than it is." But she didn't step closer. Something in their faces shifted. They no longer saw an easy mark, but a man who could fight back. Wade exhaled, trying to recover his swagger, stacked the folder, and stormed out. The door slammed so hard it left the house vibrating with his fury. Silence followed, thick, almost cold. I stood watching the space they'd left, then turned toward the camera again. The smile stayed, but it had changed. Not joy, not spite. Just the calm of someone who knows every word has been recorded, every intent exposed, and from here on they'd face the truth, captured by sound, image, and law. I closed the notebook and listened to the clock tick. Inside me, the quiet was mechanical, steady, like a compressor building. Pressure. They thought they could scare me. They forgot I'd sold cars my whole life, and I'd always known how to wait for a buyer to show their hand, then lock the door when it mattered. That morning, Austin was windless. I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee when the landline rang, its dry, clipped tone tapping straight into my nerves. I picked up. "Good morning, this is First Texas Bank. I'm Sandra from Account Verification. May I speak with Mr. Henry Drummond?" Her voice was polite, measured, but something in its cadence was off. The kind of tone I'd heard 1,000 times back in my car sales days. The voice people used before delivering bad news. "This is Henry," I said. "Thank you, Mr. Drummond. We just need to confirm a small detail. Around 9:30 this morning, a man came to our South Lamar branch, claiming you wanted him added as a joint account holder on the savings account, ending in 0426. Can you confirm that request?" I froze for a beat. A chill slid down my spine. Joint account holder. This time it wasn't just about house papers. They'd begun forging. I answered slowly, each word landing like a hammer. "No! I authorized no one." "Who was he?" Sandra hesitated, her tone dropping. "A man named Wade Lewis. He said he's your son-in-law. He presented a photocopy of a power of attorney, but no original. The signature didn't match yours. It seemed suspicious, so I stopped the process and called to verify." I drew a long breath, forcing calm. "You did right, Sandra. Now I need 2 things. First, please record internally that this was an unauthorized attempt. Second, I need a written statement confirming he appeared, claimed authorization, and was denied due to suspected forgery." "Yes, sir," she replied. "I'll draft the internal report and mail the confirmation letter to your registered address. We also have the branch CCTV if law enforcement requires it." "Thank you. And please lock all account change requests until I appear in person. I'll come by tomorrow." When the call ended, I set the phone down and stared at the porch. The Texas sunlight burned gold, yet my hands were cold. I opened my notebook and wrote, December 17th, 2024. Wade Lewis attempted to forge my signature at First Texas Bank. Transaction denied. Log and confirmation requested. I photographed the page, then dialed Abigail Kent. She picked up almost immediately. "Henry, the bank just emailed me." They CC'd my office. "I'm printing the log now. This is critical evidence. Financial forgery. We'll add it to the case file with the earlier recording. From now on, send me copies of everything. I'll maintain a parallel evidence folder." I heard her typing. Quick, precise. "If they keep pushing," she added, "I'll file for a protective injunction. This qualifies as a state-level offense. Once I obtain the CCTV, we'll preserve it." I exhaled. "I doubt they'll stop." "Exactly," she said, "which is why we let them trip over their own steps. Every mistake they make becomes our proof. Stay calm." That afternoon, on my way back from the bank, the neighborhood felt different. Mrs. Connolly, across the street, usually warm, managed only a stiff smile before turning away. Mr. Morrison, the neighbor who always borrowed my tools, asked quietly, "You all right, Henry? Heard from Linda you've been forgetful lately." I froze, anger creeping like frost. Linda, my daughter, was spreading stories that I'd lost my mind. I forced a faint smile. "Well, I still remember your name, and I remember you borrowed a 3/8 wrench yesterday and haven't returned it." He flushed. "Right. I'll bring it over tomorrow." I watched him leave, the weight settling heavily in my chest. After 30 years of selling cars, I knew the sound of lies, and gossip rolled faster than any Ford wheel. This time, the engine behind it was my own blood. That night, I went to the garage and flipped on the fluorescent lights. The familiar smell of oil filled the air, the glow catching old plaques. Top Regional Seller 2012, Integrity drives every deal. I stared at those words. Integrity isn't taught. It's something you keep when everything around you starts to rot. I opened my laptop, created a folder. Case Drummond 2024. I scanned the bank log, photographed the postmarked envelope, saved the earlier recording, and labeled a new file. Evidence. Zo 3. Attempted forgery. Bank confirmation. Each click, each save felt like loading a round into the chamber of my own justice. Outside, the wind carried barking dogs and faint murmurs. Linda was still spinning her story, the tale of a senile old man needing guardianship. But if she thought gossip could bury me, she'd forgotten one thing. I'd spent my life convincing people to trust me. Now I'd use that same skill, not to sell cars, but to sell the truth. The garage light glinted off the chrome bumper of my old car as I smiled faintly. In the rearview mirror, my eyes no longer looked tired, only calm, certain that the battle had outgrown the house. It had just moved into the streets. A week after the forgery attempt at the bank, I decided to do something Linda would never expect. Open my doors to the people who truly knew who I was. Not lawyers, not nosy neighbors, but the men who had worked beside me for 30 years, who knew every number I calculated, every handshake I sealed. Tom, Miguel, and Ray, the veteran sales team from Ford North Austin. I called Tom first. Henry, you've been hiding for years, haven't you? Not hiding, just stepping back. Let's have lunch, talk about old times, I said. Tom laughed through the phone. Just say there's barbecue and I'll bring Miguel. And Ray, he'll show up just hearing your name. Saturday noon, I opened the garage. The smell of oil and grilled meat filled the yard. Sunlight slanted across the porch roof, glinting on the brass Top Seller 2012 plaque I had just polished. I set out wooden chairs, a pitcher of iced tea, and rehung the Integrity Award 2015 on the wall, the one Linda once called old and outdated. No, today it belonged right there. The three arrived on time, unchanged by the years. Tom still round and booming, Miguel with his toolbox joking, in case you decide to fix an engine mid-lunch, and Ray, silver-haired, cool behind sunglasses, pulled a small Ford badge from his pocket and laid it on the table. Old souvenir, thought you might want it back. We sat and talked as if a decade hadn't passed. I told them about the new Mustang GT, the 2018 V8 Coyote engine. Tom laughed. Like when you convinced that lady in Round Rock to buy the 2015 Mustang. You said, "You're not buying noise, ma'am. You're buying the kind of noise worth paying for." I laughed hoarsely. She bought two, didn't she? That's right, Tom said. Then Miguel asked, Henry, do you still remember the total sales from your last year as manager? I didn't hesitate. $2,483,650, 322 cars, 86 of them Mustangs. They all burst out laughing. Miguel whistled. See? And they say you're losing it. I can't even remember last month's figures. From the kitchen, Linda heard our laughter. She appeared in the doorway, makeup perfect, smile stiff. You sound cheerful, Dad, she said flatly. Funny, you've been forgetting appointments and mixing up dates lately. Tom turned to her, gentle but sharp. Maybe so, but he never forgot a delivery date. I saw it for years. Miguel added, low and steady. No one remembers the 5.0 Coyote engine specs like he does, and no one treats customers with that kind of respect. Ray took a sip of iced tea, eyes steady on Linda. A good salesman might forget prices or paperwork, but never respect. And I see he still has that. The air froze. Linda pressed her lips, heels clicking hard as she turned back to her room. I nodded quietly to the men. Tom leaned forward, voice firm. Henry, we've heard things. They say you're not fully there anymore. I smiled, pouring tea for each of them. Heard that too. But today I don't need to defend myself. I just need you three to do one thing. Testify to the truth, if it ever comes to that. Miguel leaned back, serious now. You want us as witnesses? Not want, I said slowly. Need. Ray nodded first. If there's ever a courtroom, I'll say, Henry Drummond might forget lunch, but not the 2011 loan interest formula. Tom clapped my shoulder. I'll sign any affidavit you need. This head remembers every car you sold. Miguel concluded, voice like steel. We weren't just co-workers. We're living proof of your clarity. I stood, walked, to the wall, and hung another frame, a photo of us from the dealership's opening day in 1998. Dust blurred the image, but our eyes still shone bright. Thank you, I said, voice rough. Not for me, for justice. When they try to call me a confused old man, you'll be the brakes that stop that descent. We clinked glasses, not champagne, just iced tea. The sound crisp and bright in the quiet noon. When they left, I walked them to the gate. Tom turned back and said, Henry, you're still the most honest salesman I've ever known. Only this time you're not selling cars. You're selling back your own dignity. When the door closed, I looked around the silent room. The Integrity Award 2015 hung straight, sunlight glinting off the brass words, for a lifetime of honest work and human respect. I smiled. They could take my money, my reputation, but they would never take the memories of those who'd seen me work with real honor. In the garage, an old engine hummed to life, not the cars, but the heart of a man ready to get back on the road. Not to sell, but to prove the truth still runs. I had sold cars for 30 years, and there was one lesson I never forgot. Everything leaves a trace. People can lie, but machines never do. That night, after Linda and Wade locked their bedroom door, I sat alone in the garage. The fluorescent light cast a pale white glow over the old plaques on the wall. Top Seller 2012, Integrity Award 2015. I stared at them for a long time, then opened a cardboard box beside me. Inside were two small motion sensor cameras, video only, no audio. I'd bought them days earlier, waiting for this moment. I installed one in the corner of the living room ceiling, the other in the kitchen facing the hallway. Both hidden, both unnoticed. The tiny green lights blinked, ready. I didn't care if it made me seem paranoid. In this house, trust was already dead. 3 nights later, around 2 a.m, a loud crash woke me, one thud, then several more. The sound of breaking porcelain, a half-stifled laugh. I rose quietly and peered through the crack of my bedroom door. Light spilled from the kitchen, stretching long shadows across the wall. Wade was smashing dishes one by one onto the floor. Linda stood beside him, phone in hand, snapping photos like a crime scene reporter. I didn't move. I didn't speak. The cameras were doing my talking. The next morning, I brewed coffee and sat at the table as if nothing had happened. Linda passed by, face arranged into false concern. Dad, did you drop something last night? The kitchen's a mess. I sipped calmly. Probably the neighbor's cat. She froze for a fraction, eyes flickering, then turned away. When they left the house, I locked the door and went straight to the garage. I pulled the memory card from the camera and loaded it onto my computer. The footage was crystal clear. Timestamp 2:03 a.m., December 28th, 2024. Warm yellow light. Wade is throwing dishes. Linda is filming, smiling. No doubt, no mistake. I watched it 3 times. The first time hurt. The second burned. The third, only calm remained. I trimmed the clip and saved it as Cam, Living Room Totikidi Seat MP4. Then I typed a note and printed it. Evidence number 4. Wade and Linda destroying property, staging a scene. Recorded at 2:03 a.m. on December 28th, 2024. I sent the file to Abigail Kent with a short email. They staged the scene. This is the raw footage. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Abigail's voice was low but steady. Henry, this is perfect evidence. The video has timestamp, lighting, motion, undeniable. I know, I said. I don't have to call them liars anymore. They'll do that themselves. She paused, then said slowly, "This video will end them." I hung up and sat still for a long while. Outside, Texas sunlight poured through the window, glinting off the shards of porcelain they hadn't cleaned up. The light caught each crack, each edge, like truth refracted through deceit. I gathered the pieces into a box, labeled it Scene of Incident, and placed it beside the hard drive in the safe. Everything sealed, catalogued. That evening I sat again in the garage under the soft yellow lamp. The camera blinked steadily, silent but honest. I looked at it and smiled faintly. No shouting, no arguing, no convincing. Just the truth, speaking for itself, frame by frame. After sending the video to Abigail, I knew the real storm had arrived. 3 days later, she informed me that Wade and Linda had officially filed a petition for guardianship, accusing me of being incapable of self-care, prone to agitation and a danger to others. I just smiled. They thought they could control the court the same way they controlled a car they never learned to drive. With the video, the bank records, and witness statements, I knew I no longer had to speak. The truth would do it for me. That morning, Austin was gray and still, no sun, no wind. I stepped out of my old pickup and looked up at the Travis County Courthouse, a white stone building I had driven past countless times in my years selling cars, never imagining that one day I would walk inside not to make a sale, but to reclaim the truth. Beside me was attorney Abigail Kent, holding a thick black case. Inside was everything I had gathered for months: hospital papers, bank logs, recordings, videos, and the sworn statements of my 3 old colleagues. It was all arranged like the perfect service manual for a machine called justice. Across the hall, I saw Wade and Linda talking with their lawyer, a young man who looked confident but restless. Linda avoided my eyes, clutching her purse tightly. Wade flashed a faint smile, the kind of smirk people wear when they still believe lying can win. The hearing began. The courtroom was small, sunlight slanting through tall windows, gleaming on the plaque that read, "In God We Trust." I sat in the front row while Abigail stood to present. The petition from Wade and Linda accused me of being unable to manage finances or behavior, claiming I needed guardianship to protect my assets. I listened without anger, only a quiet sadness. They were once my family, and now they were trying to erase me with paperwork. Then Abigail rose. She opened her case and laid out each document carefully, speaking slowly and clearly. "Exhibit 1, she said, emergency room report from St. David's Hospital, showing trauma to the left eye consistent with the victim's account, pushed by his son-in-law, not self-inflicted." The form bore the hospital logo, physician's signature, and seal. "Exhibit 2, she continued, bank confirmation from First Texas Bank documenting an attempted signature forgery and unauthorized addition of another name to the account. The bank flagged it and issued a written statement." Wade's fingers drummed nervously on his knee. "Exhibit 3, Abigail said, her voice lowering. "The video recorded at 2:03 a.m. on December 28th, 2024. She handed the USB to the clerk. The screen lit up. The footage played, dim yellow light, Linda taking photos, Wade smashing dishes. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the courtroom. No one moved. Even the judge's pen stopped tapping. The glow from the screen fell across Wade's face, stripping away his arrogance until only fear remained. When the clip ended, silence filled the room. The judge looked at Wade for a long time, then at Linda. "Mr. and Mrs. Lewis," she said firmly, "do you have anything to explain about your actions in this video?" Linda trembled. Wade froze. Neither spoke. Abigail stepped forward, her voice calm but cutting like steel. "Your Honor, the evidence presented, along with 3 witness statements from Mr. Drummond's former colleagues, proves that my client is fully competent, financially responsible, and the victim of coercion and financial fraud." The judge nodded and took notes. Her voice was steady, as she read the ruling aloud, each word echoing through the room. After reviewing all evidence, the court concludes that Mr. Henry Drummond is the victim of coercion and financial fraud by family members. The petition for guardianship is hereby denied in full. The court issues a protective order prohibiting Wade and Linda Lewis from contacting or approaching Mr. Drummond within 200 yards. This case is referred to Texas Adult Protective Services for investigation of elder abuse. Wade collapsed into his seat. Linda burst into tears, but no one in the room felt pity. I simply sat still, listening. No triumph, no bitterness, only peace. The same kind of peace that comes when a car, after months of repair, finally starts again, its engine steady and sure. As I stepped out of the courthouse, Texas sunlight blazed across the stone steps. A reporter from the Austin Chronicle was waiting. "Mr. Drummond," she called out, "could you say a few words? How do you feel about winning this case?" I looked into the camera and said calmly, "No one truly wins when they have to take their own family to court, but sometimes silence stops being love. It becomes a ticket for others to destroy you. I just chose to stand up at the right time." The next day, the Austin Chronicle ran a headline, "Former car salesman overturns family lawsuit." Beneath it was a photo of me leaving the courthouse, sunlight slanting across the steps, a black case in my hand. The article read, "Mr. Drummond didn't just sell cars his whole life. He proved that honesty is the only warranty that never expires." I finished reading, folded the paper, set it aside, and poured another cup of coffee. For the first time in months, I felt peace. Not because I had won, but because justice had spoken for me, and I hadn't needed to raise my voice. 3 months later, Abigail's office sent me the court's follow-up. Texas APS had completed its investigation. Wade was fined for financial fraud, lost his inheritance rights, and was ordered to reimburse all my legal fees. Linda was required to attend 6 months of counseling for psychological coercion against an elder. No one went to jail, but both signed an agreement barring them from contacting me or using my name in any financial matter. Justice in America isn't always loud. It just taps on paper, softly but firmly enough for everyone to know the matter is settled. I smiled as I read. I didn't need them to suffer. I only needed them to understand what it feels like to lose something they once took for granted, a father's trust. The next month, 2 letters arrived on the same day. One from Wade, one from Linda. Wade's was brief. "I'm working at a repair shop outside Dallas. I understand why you did what you did. If possible, I'd like to come learn from you." Linda included a photo of her and her son standing outside a small rental home, with a note, "I'm starting over. I hope you're well." I read both, not angry, not glad. I simply folded them and placed them in the drawer beside the old wrench Wade once bragged about buying with his first paycheck at 16. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It just means letting time teach the lesson for you. 2 months after the trial, Austin bloomed into spring. The honey gold light washed over the streets, and the breeze carried the scent of pine and motor oil from the old garages around South Lamar. I still drove my same old Ford pickup, but the weight in my chest was gone. I had a new plan, what I called my rebuild. I didn't want the past months to end with a verdict or a newspaper story. I wanted them to mean something. I had spent a lifetime selling cars. Now I wanted to spend what was left teaching others how to fix them, and more importantly, how to rebuild trust. With help from Rosa Turner, the cafe owner who once told me how her son tried to take guardianship of her, I began restoring an old garage on the corner of Oldtorf. The walls were cracked, the roof rusted, the floor split, but to me it looked like a new beginning. We called it Drummond Repair and Training Center. Rosa laughed. "That name's too long. Who's going to remember it?" "Doesn't matter," I said. "What it does is more important than what it's called." At the same time, Abigail Kent helped me register a 501c3 nonprofit, the Drummond Mechanics Scholarship. a fund for underprivileged youth who dream of becoming mechanics. You'll be the founder, she said, handing me the notarized documents, and Rosa and I will co-sign. I looked at the bold letters, Founder, Henry Drummond. For the first time in years, I felt proud, not for selling something, but for building something no one could take away. On the first day, only 5 students showed up, 3 high school dropouts, 1 kid fresh out of juvenile detention, and a girl named Lacey, 18, a former waitress who loved tinkering with engines. They stood awkwardly, unsure how to begin. I pointed at an old motor block in the center of the shop. This, I said, is the heart of a car. If you learn to listen to it, you'll understand how the whole world works. A boy named Caleb grinned. It doesn't have a heart, sir, just spark plugs and oil. I chuckled. True, but every sound it makes is a heartbeat of honest work. And remember this, fixing cars is easy. Fixing trust takes longer. The room fell silent. Then they leaned over the engine, lifting the hood. The smell of oil filled the air, blending with Texas sunlight streaming through the windows. The clink of metal on metal echoed, a rhythm not of chaos, but of life coming back. In the days that followed, the garage came alive. Each kid took a task, cleaning spark plugs, checking tire pressure, studying manuals. I stood behind them, not shouting, just guiding. Sometimes I told old dealership stories about honest customers, about those who paid every installment on time, about how a handshake could still be a contract. Rosa brought coffee each morning, the scent of espresso and oil mixed into something strange but real, the smell of work and conscience. Abigail dropped by sometimes to review the funds books, smiling as she saw the kids washing cars in the sun. Looks like you won another case, she joked. I shook my head. No, I'm just fixing my life with a wrench and the truth. By the weekend, we hung a new sign on the door, Drummond Mechanics Scholarship, for those who build with honest hands. In the sunset, the brass letters gleamed like a promise. I looked at my students, listening as the first engine roared to life. That sound wasn't just metal. It was faith returning after being broken. For the first time in years, I felt life moving again, not powered by an engine, but by the heart. And in that steady rhythm, I understood. Some things, once broken, can still be repaired, as long as the one holding the wrench never gives up. 1 year had passed since that courtroom day. This Texas autumn came slowly, sunlight lingering over Austin's roads, like honey melting across the ground. I stood before the garage door, gazing through the glass at the Drummond Mechanics Scholarship logo, its paint slightly faded by the sun, and felt as light as the breeze. This year I decided to host my first Thanksgiving dinner in the very house I had reclaimed, not to celebrate victory, but to thank those who helped me survive through truth. I invited Rosa, Abigail, 3 old colleagues from the Ford dealership, and a few former scholarship students. The table was set in the living room, the same spot where a year ago Wade had slammed his hand down and shouted that I would regret it. Now everything was calm. Candles flickered softly, wine shimmered, and the gentle clink of silverware warmed the air. People laughed, shared garage stories, and talked about new scholarship projects in Dallas and San Antonio. Only 1 chair remained empty at the head of the table. At 2:15, the doorbell rang. I rose. Linda stood there alone, wearing a plain brown coat, holding a small gift bag, her eyes filled with hesitation and remorse. You came, I said quietly. I just wanted to thank you for letting me be here, she murmured. I invited her in. No one spoke. The room went still enough to hear the clock ticking. Linda looked around, recognizing each face. Rosa, Abigail, Tom, Miguel, Ray, the people who had witnessed the truth she once denied. She sat in the empty chair. I sat across from her. The warm light reflected off the glasses, off her face. I poured the wine and said steadily, "Thank you all for coming. A year ago in this same house, I stayed silent while being humiliated. Today I just want to close everything with truth. I reached down, took out a black envelope, and set it before Linda. The table fell silent. "Open it," I said slowly, firmly. Linda looked at me, her hands trembling as she pulled the envelope open. Inside was a copy of my new will, white paper, a red notary seal, my handwriting neat and deliberate. She read line by line, and the color drained from her face. "The property at 1240 Oak Ridge Drive, Austin, Texas, together with 70% of remaining assets, shall be transferred to the Texas Automotive Integrity Fund, a trust supporting vocational training and honesty in the automotive industry. The remaining heir, Linda Drummond, shall receive a symbolic sum of $10,000, accompanied by a no-contest clause stating that any challenge to this shall result in full forfeiture of the inheritance." No one spoke. Only Linda's quick, uneven breaths filled the silence. She looked up, eyes red, voice trembling. "Dad, I've read it. I don't blame you." Her voice softened. "I deserve this. I know I chose the wrong person and the wrong way to treat you. I thought your silence was weakness, but it was patience." I said nothing, letting her continue. "Dad," she inhaled deeply, "I don't need the money. I just want, if possible, to come to your foundation, wash cars, help out, anything. I just want to see you without feeling ashamed." The room was still. Rosa lowered her head. Abigail gently touched my shoulder. I looked at Linda, not with anger, but with understanding. "I didn't create the foundation to punish anyone," I said slowly. "I built it to remind those who lost their way that there's still a place to begin again. If you truly want to fix things, the door's always open." Linda broke down crying. She folded the will, placed it back on the table with trembling hands, then stood. "Thank you for leaving that door open." No one said a word. The golden light reflected off the wooden table, glinting on the tear that had fallen onto the paper. This silence wasn't judgment anymore. It was release. After dinner, Rosa and I stepped onto the porch. The sunset cast a copper glow across the sky. On the garage wall, the logo for those who fix what others break caught the evening light, shining like a prayer. Rosa leaned on the railing. "Do you think Linda will understand?" I looked toward the road where headlights faded into the distance. "Maybe not today, but someday she will, because sometimes the hardest lesson is about the trust you destroyed yourself." A week later, Abigail sent me a court bulletin. Wade had been convicted of financial fraud and had his auto sales license suspended for 3 years. The dealership terminated his contract immediately. No one had to seek revenge. The law and time handled it. I heard he moved out of state, working as a temporary mechanic in New Mexico. No one knows how he's doing, only that for the first time, he has to earn every dollar with his own oil-stained hands. I read the news, folded the paper, not happy, not angry. Sometimes justice doesn't knock with a gavel. It arrives with life's invoices. The breeze carried the faint scent of motor oil, mingled with wine and the Texas dusk, the scent of justice served in silence. I smiled faintly. No hatred, no pain, just peace. I had repaired the broken car called Family, and it had started running again. That night, when I turned off the garage lights, only the soft glow from the brass plaque remained. For those who fix what others break. I realized then that some collisions in life don't dent steel, they scar the heart. But if you have the patience to mend and the courage to forgive, the engine called justice will start again, slowly but surely. If you've ever been looked down on just for being too kind, if you've ever stayed silent to protect your dignity, leave a single dot in the comments so I'll know that faith in justice still lives somewhere. And if you believe dignity never goes out of style, subscribe so you won't miss true stories like this, where silence is the weapon and compassion is the victory.